So that's my phone background. All right, here we go. We're at the end, very end of 1 Samuel
31.
which is kind of like really connected to 2 Samuel. I know we had said last week it was all the same. I mean, this is all one story. They just broke it up, but
And it also feels like it's a long time coming. It's like we said really early on,
right.
You're not going to be king.
Yeah.
You're going to die. Your sons are going to be king.
Yep.
And here we finally are, which was another one of my takeaways is, we're reading this and it's like, man, this is taking a while for this all to happen. And this is just one life. This is 30 years or 40 years. So that's just good to remember.
So ultimately, Saul, it's at the end. It's kind of important to remember the details of this because it's what picks up in 2 Samuel. But he's basically like, dude, I don't want to be killed by anything. So, hey, armor bear, run me through, kill me.
Yep.
And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And he's like, fine. And then he just falls on his sword. And the armor bear is like, oh, crap, I better do that too.
Yeah.
So,
it's an honorable way to die. It's an honorable death for the king. I do think so. I think we can read this in our context and say, oh, but I think it was he didn't want to be humiliated, and he is the king of Israel.
Yeah.
And so he didn't want to give himself over to the Philistines, who he was supposed to be defending his kingdom against. He didn't do it the right way, but I do think he was trying to do it. And it didn't work, and so that's what they thought was honorable.
Yeah. So then we flip over to 2 Samuel.
And his sons also.
Yep.
Yeah, they were also murdered. Everybody's gone.
Well, they're in battle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yes, they all die.
is it not murder if you're
I
in
don't
battle?
know.
Like, I mean, it's...
There are some
don't
murders
know.
coming, though.
There are a lot of murders
in
coming.
2 Samuel,
So in, I guess, 2 Samuel really begins with David starting to lament the news that...
He gets the news, from...
Yeah. So, so there's a guy that shows up, the Amalekite that you were talking about last week, who is trying to, I guess, use Saul's death to his gain and maybe go and he thinks he's going to have some favor with David or something.
Maybe.
But David's like, what the heck? You're
he thought it was
lying.
good news.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, Saul's been trying to kill David for many years.
Yeah.
And it's, Saul's gone now. So he's like, hey, I'm coming bearing this great news for you. And David is still consistent. He's so consistent in what he has continued to say, continued to do and say.
Yeah.
Who do you think you are to have taken the life of the Lord's anointed?
Yeah. And so he executes him.
Yes,
killed.
but it is the same. Like David could have done it. He's like, I could have done this, but this is the king, and I'm not gonna celebrate the death of him. That's good.
So how do you think he knew that this guy didn't kill him?
I don't know if David did know that. The guy claimed to. I mean, he came back with Saul's stuff.
I guess
Why do you think that?
Yeah, I know. I guess I thought the way I read it, it's like he knew that it's like, maybe I read that wrong, or I just was reading him. I was making up stuff, but anyway, I guess I thought he was like, hey, no, like you didn't kill Saul. He killed himself, or
yeah. It's a different story. The details are different when we end 1 Samuel and verse his story.
Yeah, maybe that was why.
Yeah.
But then we get into this letter of lament, which, you had mentioned a couple podcasts ago, like some of the Psalms are like, tied into this season of his life. And so definitely as I started reading this, it's like this glimpse of like, oh yeah, this is how he writes in, this like kind of poetic way.
He is poetic, good catch.
Yeah. I don't know if it's good, but...
No, that's good. I mean, this gives you a glimpse here in David's story that helps connect what you read in the Psalms, many of which he wrote to the way he thinks, the way he writes.
Poet king.
And obviously within here, I mean, you can definitely tell his connection with Jonathan still. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. I'm sure some people will read there in chapter 20 or verse 26. I mean, that's a...
Read it for us.
Okay. It says, I'm distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasant have you been to me. Your love to me was extraordinary, surpassing the love of a woman. I think, the
love of women.
The love of women.
Shane.
What did I say?
Of a woman.
Oh, the love of a woman, or just of women. Not just one, all.
I think that might be important.
Are you gonna read something?
I am going to read something again from the NIV Cultural Background Study Bible, which I've used before.
Okay.
It gives us some insight into a world that's very different than ours. And so here's what they say about verse 26. Some modern readers, unaware or neglectful of the biblical and ancient Near Eastern background to such expressions of love, have tried to read a homosexual nuance into David's words. However, love, and the language around it, was often used to express loyalty in legal contexts, where the legal and not sexual connotations of the word, such as dear and beloved, is evident. The same is true of the Hebrew word for love in many contexts. Commentators have perhaps been led astray by David's extolling of Jonathan's love as, quote, more wonderful than that of women, but David's intent may simply have been to underscore the remarkably selfless character of Jonathan's loyalty to David and willingness to defer to him with regard to the kingship.
Yeah, I mean, so the context, not even the fact that Jonathan was like, no, I as the son of the king should become king, or I'm an heir to the throne.
Right.
Like, I'm giving that to you, that kind of loyalty. But I still go back, and I don't know why I think this. Maybe because my family watches Band of Brothers probably way too much. But you see these clips of these people who've like fought in battle together in war, and just how these guys talk about each other like afterwards, like in the interviews of like the real life men, and the connection and the bond that they share. It's like, dude, that is a love that is deeper and so different beyond that of a sexual nature with someone.
And it's love of women isn't the same thing. So he's not saying like more than my wife, right?
Yeah.
He didn't say Abigail or whichever one of his wives he would want to put there.
Pick one.
The love of women. So that's romantic love, right? So he's saying this is a deeper love than even that of romantic love. And that's not bad.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Like there are all kinds of love that God gives us, and we should celebrate that and lean into that and not be nervous about that. But I just don't think that's necessarily a sexual love of women.
That's what happens, the dangers of like trying to read this sometimes with our own like
questions, our own questions.
Yeah, our own stuff.
What's Scripture talking about? What are the questions Scripture's asking versus what are we asking?
Yep. And not understanding the context or even reading it in the bigger picture of the narrative that we're in.
And also, this story and like here in what we read in 1 Samuel has been used by commentators and other people in the past to say, well, God endorses homosexuality because look at David. And we're trying to say that's not the purpose.
Yeah.
If there was someone who saved my husband Aaron's life multiple times to his own detriment and who ended up dying even though he knew that Aaron was, that love would be so good and deep. I would be okay if when he died, Aaron was like, that was a deeper, greater love than I've ever known. Because it's the kind of love that Jesus shows us. It's a sacrifice for someone else unto death. That's really what Jonathan shows us. I love this character in the Bible. That is a better and deeper love. It's a good thing.
Yeah. Okay, so David quickly, not quickly, but it turns from this lament to he's anointed king over Judah. You're getting another book.
I have another map for you.
Map. Dude, you're such a map guy. I love it.
I do like maps.
I love it.
Okay, so he is anointed king of Judah.
Yep.
And I had just this one little map. So this is the ESV Bible Atlas from Crossway. And here's why I like this map here. Is it shows you in green the territory of Saul's son, Ishbosheth, and then the territory of David. So again, think this is Judah, and this is the rest of the tribes.
Yeah, hold this up. Maybe someone can see it. So the
Ishbosheth, that's Saul's son.
So the green is Saul's son. This dark stuff is David.
Not all of Saul's sons were killed. There's one.
Yep. And And the green is referred to as Israel, whereas David at this point is king of Judah.
Judah, yeah.
And
to the south.
That's good right now at this point to have that distinction in your mind, because Israel later will separate, and there'll be a civil war, and Judah will be its own thing, and Israel will be everything else, mostly. But then later, like now, we would just call what's left Israel. So it's good to start thinking in those categories. Israel at this point is everything but Judah, and David is king of Judah, not of Israel. And
you can see how that happens. So there are all these territories, because remember when we come out of Egypt, every 12 tribe gets their own territory.
Yep.
So what we're in right now is trying to unify that into one nation that's under Yahweh.
Yep.
But we're not there yet.
We're not there yet, but it will happen as we read. And then David is king of Israel, including Judah's brought into what all of Israel is.
The whole nation. But it'll start to fracture again.
And here you also have a little picture of what Jerusalem looks like when he moves the capital there. And we'll get more into that as
I think I got one of those in at the end of what we read here. There's a big map in my Bible right here. Yeah, that's the same picture. That's because it's the ESV.
It's the ESV
Atlas,
Bible Atlas.
Yeah, cool.
So this is the size of Jerusalem whenever he eventually takes it. And under his rule, it expands. And you see here, this is this rock that's in that picture. That's eventually where the temple is constructed in Solomon's day. Now there's the Dome of the Rock over it.
Yeah, so today. you were in Israel a couple years ago. How much of
I was going to say, everyone who's listening, we should all take a trip together.
I was thinking that as I was looking up all these maps. Like, I so badly want to go to the Holy Land.
I know.
And see all
I wonder, like, how much when you're there are they like, dude, this is like the Old Testament part of the.
Oh yes, it's all of this, and it is really,
it
is very helpful for biblical context.
Yeah,
it brings it to life. Like, this is the wilderness. It's not. That's what I was thinking, but you can see it.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I got to get over there someday.
Okay, so David's king over Judah, the smaller section of grander Israel.
Which Lion of Judah, I mean, there's just a lot there. You know, he's going to be the king.
He's the king. And then Saul's son, the only one that's left, I guess, and Abner, his like lieutenant guy.
Yep.
So he's still, this is just typical, right? Yeah. So Saul dies, and it's not like everyone knows David has been anointed and David's going to be king, and that's Yahweh's plan. There is, okay, who should be king now? And so it's the commander, is Saul's commander, or it's the son of his commander, who then finds one of Saul's sons and says, okay, this is going to be the new king. So the next few chapters are about that, just who's going to be king. A son, who's loyal to who?
Usually death involved.
Yeah, which we kind of quickly get to with, I guess, Abner kind of defecting.
Eventually, yeah.
So Abner's the son who, yes, and then he...
No, Ishbosheth is his son. Abner's the lieutenant.
Abner's the lieutenant.
That's
right. Yep. So think Abner is Saul's guy, and Joab is David's guy.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of... I guess the part where I got was really when basically Abner defects, and then he gets killed, and then David's like, dude, what the heck? What did you do? Why did you do that?
Right.
And
it's like he was under a white flag of peace.
Yeah.
We were negotiating.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think the big picture point of these is that David doesn't kill any of the potential kings. So they are at war. They're trying to figure out who's king, but there's all these factions going on, but he's not responsible for assassinating one of Saul's sons.
Yeah.
He is still free of that guilt, blood guilt. He is the true king. He doesn't need to do that because Yahweh has anointed him and will make him king.
Yeah, again, he has that trust in Yahweh's plan for his life. And he has such regard for Saul's family because he was anointed originally as the king of Israel. So we'll see later in 2 Samuel, I think Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth, is mentioned briefly, but we're going to get to a cooler story later about him.
So one thing, it was interesting in here in 3, we get a bunch of lists of like all these sons that David has with all these like different women.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that kind of struck me was thinking, I think back to Saul. We didn't hear a lot about Saul having a bunch of wives and multiple children, but David there's definitely like a lot of wives and a lot of kids. And I didn't know if like, is that because Saul is, the king was busy always off at war and David's doing something different here? He seems to be battling too. I don't know. Just why didn't culturally back then Saul have a bunch of kids? Or maybe he did, we didn't read about him. I don't know.
I think he did. And we just didn't read about them because like historically they don't care as much about his descendants as they're going to about David's descendants. But I think he did, which is why he has this random son we've never heard of now that maybe is going to be set up as king when really this commander is in charge. So
yeah.
Yep.
That's helpful. Did you have any other? You're like,
no. That seems to make sense to me. He probably did, but they don't matter to the story that's being told here because we're done with Saul. We're moving on to David, and David's lineage matters.
Yeah,
and I also think David's behavior matters. It's being pointed out to us that look at what he's doing. It's not God's plan to have all of these wives and concubines and all of these children. This is not God's design, and it's going to lead to some problems, which we're going to get to.
Yeah, with Saul, you see sort of his pattern that turns into his destruction, right? His downfall. And so when you're asking, why do we keep hearing about these wives of David and how it happened, eventually we see where that's leading us.
Yeah. Well, it's just hard because, normally like, got to think back to the culture, like what was going on there. It's like, okay, well, if culturally that was acceptable, why do we only hear about one, not the other?
Right.
So,
So David mourns Abner at the end of 3.
Yep.
Again, to say, like, his blood is not on my hands.
Yeah.
And I think he does such a public display of mourning so that everyone knows this was not some secret plan that he was in charge of. He was against it.
Yeah.
And that's what you want in your king. You want an upright man of character.
He doesn't have to force it. He is going to be king whenever it's time. He's not trying to make it happen on his own.
Yeah.
And he shows that over and over and over.
He's humble, patient, kind of waiting.
Yes, it's Hannah's song.
Yeah.
He's still trying to be the humble one who's exalted, not the one who has to be humbled because he's trying to exalt himself.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the curse, that Joab ends up getting killed for that. But it wasn't just that. There's almost like a curse. Like,
yeah, that's how bad this is.
Yeah.
Which is weird to read. You're like, oh, gosh. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it ties back to like more like, I think like Old Testament, like at the end where it's like there were blessings and curses with... Dude, there's so many people back.
Yeah, I think curses for us sounds like almost like we were talking about the last podcast, like some sort of like spiritual, like I'm going to put a curse on you. But this is really just like saying like, would the Lord do? Like just destruction instead of blessing.
Yep.
That's all that means.
Yep. But then, he mourns in a way that excuse me, people start to see and are like, oh man. Maybe this guy is the people in Israel, not just Judah.
That's right.
Yes.
From where Abner came from.
Yeah, this is like all this big setup for when he is really the king.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the son of Saul is murdered, Ishbosheth.
Yep.
And at the end of chapter 4, David commands his young men, I'm in verse 12, and they killed them and cut off their hands and feet and hanged them beside the pool at Hebron. And then they took the decapitated head of Ishbosheth and buried it in the tomb of Abner.
Yeah, so that was more, maybe if I want to make sure I get this right, this was still David trying to like honor, like,
that's right.
Hey, don't do all that with that stuff. Like that's not good. Like I didn't want you to like kill him, chop him up, and bring him around. Like, so it's like trying to give him proper burial type stuff or kind of honor.
And the punishment for the guys that did it, cut off the hands that carried out the deed and the feet that brought the news.
Yeah, jeez.
So I think we read this and we think, of course, David's going to be king because we don't maybe know the story detailed, but we do know the story. David's the king. and then Jesus is one day the descendant of David. But for them, it wasn't clear. So you have all of these really detailed stories that are sort of supposed to support that David really is the true king.
Yeah.
So you have these battles that are like 12 men, let's say 12 tribes, and they're fighting against each other. It's the future of Israel at stake here. And what is he going to do in these moments? Well, he's going to be the true king who isn't murdering people, who is obedient to Yahweh. So it's a lot of details, but it's leading us to this is the ideal king. This is the real king. He's finally here.
Yeah. And I think, it's just interesting when you think of the history of David's role with, the killing of Goliath and just the battles that happened after that and how, all of Israel, Saul killed thousands, David killed tens of thousands or hundreds, whatever that was. So it's like people should have known or people knew that. And yet there was still this kind of question of who's it going to be? When clearly, and people probably knew
Samuel knew, but he was hiding with the enemies.
Yeah.
He was on the run.
But people were still saying, Saul killed this many, David killed this many. So I don't know. Just is interesting still.
Yeah, but Saul's family, again, Saul wanted Jonathan to be king, which is why he reprimanded him for honoring David and saving his life. He probably communicated to his family, we've got the power and we're going to keep it.
And to everyone around him.
That's right.
Yeah.
My son is going to be the future king. I mean, that's not in here, but...
Yeah, but if you just got one family saying they're in charge and the rest of the nation saying hey, this other guy is greater than him, basically... I don't know.
Yeah, this is before democracy.
Even the Philistines were saying...
They didn't know all these stories yet, right?
True.
So they're living their lives. They hear about this David who has defended them, but they don't know that Saul's trying to kill him.
Yeah.
And that Samuel has anointed him as the future king. That's like this big picture story that God is working out that we don't always see.
Yeah. So then in 5, ultimately David becomes king over both, all
of it. Yep.
Todos.
And he is, I think it points out, the capital, or where he takes up his residence, is Hebron for 7 years, and then takes Jerusalem, and that becomes the capital city, and he's there for 33 years. And that's because, again, this is connected back to Joshua and Judges. When the Israelites come into Canaan, they're supposed to drive out all the inhabitants of the land and all that, and they didn't do that in Jerusalem. So it's still occupied by other people. So that's what we read about, is he defeats
Philistines there.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And starting in 17. So ultimately,
it's such a foundational story for Israel.
Yeah.
This is the city of David.
Mm-hmm.
This is Jerusalem. This is the moment whenever he really becomes king. Because we've been reading throughout this story, but this is it. This is whenever it starts.
Well, that's what I think to Exodus stories or just the big thing. You have these big moments, this is another big turn, big moment.
It is.
So.
It's not necessarily a napkin story.
No.
But it really is a big moment. And our story, if you have the bookmarks and how we sort of are trying to categorize it to help it be easier to read through, we have the people, God's people, they're with his presence and they're in his place. And the place is a big part of this story. And we're finally getting to, they're going to really have this place that's supposed to be where the kingdom of God is.
Yeah. And with God's presence in the place, they experience his protection and his provision. They have all that they need. They flourish. Everything is abundant. And the ideal king is the one who leads the people to experience God's presence. And he leads the people in God's way. And that's what we see here. This is now happening.
Yeah. And I know ultimately we know a little bit of the story ahead, it's not going to always be rosy peaches for David, but at least at this point it seems he's a man after God's own heart. He's doing it the right way. This is the king, the leader that...
It's a humble king.
Yeah.
He's humble. He's listening to God's voice. He's obedient. He has radical trust. It's the same story we've really been reading since Genesis, and he's really embodying all of that right now.
You can subscribe to receive additional resources to help you study the story of Scripture at clearcreekresources.org. We'll see you next week.